We are live! Hello, everybody. I'm Lauren Marie Fleming, a.k.a. Queerie Bradshaw, and I'm here with another wonderful interview as part of the Sex Ed Hangout series. You can see all of the interviews at youtube.com/Queerie Bradshaw. Look at the Sex Ed Hangout playlist, and you can see upcoming hangouts at queriebradshaw.com/Sex Ed Hangout. Today, I'm really excited to bring you Sinclair Sexsmith. And hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello. And yeah, today we're going to talk about something that's really close to my heart, and it's the politics of BDSM, and specifically the sexual politics of BDSM, and how it kind of goes against the idea of like hitting women can go against the idea of feminism, but they can also go together and interchange, and it's this wonderful exploring sex and exploring feminism and all the things I love. I'm really excited about it. So Sinclair, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. So my name is Sinclair Sexsmith. That is not my name at birth, if you couldn't figure that one out. I don't know why that's a funny joke to me lately, but it has been. I primarily write at sugarbutch.net, and I teach workshops and coach people one-on-one with around sexualities and genders and relationships and whatever kind of kinky adventures that they might be pursuing. I've done that full-time now for about 5 years, and then part-time for like about 5 years before that, or maybe more. And this particular, the sexual politics of BDSM is a workshop that I offer that primarily focuses around agency and consent and power. So there's a lot of concepts about that, and about kind of reconciling the idea of feminist politics with BDSM play. And that's kind of the core of what the workshop focuses on. And then, but I'm excited to just chat and hear some questions, and I can talk about what's in the workshop, or we can just do Q&A the whole time. I'm game. I'm like ready to go. Let's do it.
That's the exciting part about being live. We really don't have any clue what we're doing, and so we just kind of go with the flow.
Rad.
And let's go back to that agency, power, and consent.
Mm-hmm.
Why those three? Why do they make the foundation of what you discuss when you discuss BDSM?
They are foundations in feminism and in sexual politics in general. So when I'm talking about like sexual politic theory through you know, from I don't know, Kate Millett and all the way up and like through Judith Butler, and that's more gender theory, but that's still sexuality in the country, to like then the kink theorists that generally have a little less academic language and more hands-on body experience language. They're all talking about things like power and agency and consent. And the question around power specifically is about who has the power in the exchange? Where does the power lie? Who's got more social power than another, and how are we using the power and throwing it around? Are we seeing each other as equal beings, or are we seeing each other as like, I'm in charge of you and you're, you know, lesser than me? So all of those things are aspects of the sexual politic theory that gets thrown around in queer and feminist theory classes and in books and in researches that in that subject line. So in inserting BDSM into all of that, those are some of the key concepts that I get really excited about kind of merging and exploring together. And that's where those came from.
I think that they really are the building blocks of a good, solid BDSM relationship. And they're also the building blocks of feminism. So I feel like feminism and BDSM have these two basic building blocks, so why wouldn't they go hand in hand?
Totally.
But yet we find that a lot of people have issues, even people I know that are really steeped in the BDSM world. I was talking to my friend the other day, and he said he could take on a boy but not a girl as a daddy because he still has hang-ups about what it means to be a feminist daddy controlling a girl versus a feminist daddy bringing up a boy and training a boy, and what those differences really can bring about in his guilt over being a feminist, hurting a girl versus hurting a boy. And I think that that's really interesting that we have the same building blocks, but yet we still can't quite feel the mesh of the two. Where do you think that historically comes from?
sexism. I mean, the good old-fashioned misogyny in some ways around our notions of what women are and what men are and what girls are and what boys are. And I mean, I guess that's particularly responding to like daddy girl versus daddy boy, or playing hard with the girl versus playing hard with the boy. And it's easy to kind of see the differences on the surface and not necessarily delve deeper into gender things. And I know you and I both are kind of mired in this genderqueer, trans forward worlds that where gender is more complicated than girl and boy, and sometimes gets even more boiled down to that at the same hand. Like the number of times I've heard people make stereotypes about butches based on stereotypes about men, I want to kind of be like, that's not gender liberation, right? Like that's stereotyping, and I appreciate that you're seeing my masculinity, but if you're holding me to masculine social standards, that doesn't have to do with liberation around my gender. So I think tons of it has to do with just good old-fashioned sexism, and then around fear, and around the fear that we're gonna be a bad feminist, be perceived as doing something wrong, when especially so many of us in the queer, feminist, sexual liberation movements really work our asses off to be for liberation for all, and we really fear doing something that will make us seem like that's not what we're doing. We fear making missteps around that.
Yeah. So what would you suggest to people? Like, for example, me, I work sometimes I go with my friend into her dungeon and do some really degrading things to men that love it. Yet when I go to do those to women, I still find myself being like, ugh, it's a little bit harder for me to kick a woman when she's down. And what would you suggest to people who are still having a little bit of that pushback against consensually hurting somebody who is feminine because of their feminist ideals?
I would suggest a couple of things. In that situation, for me, I would need more checking in and more feedback and more kind of verbal processing around hitting and playing and degrading somebody feminine than I don't know about than I would, but that's something that I would need probably in most scenes. So if that's this kind of situation where you're coming into it as a guest and you don't necessarily have an ongoing relationship with this person that you're gonna come in and be a bonus humiliator with, I would have that kind of processing and scaffolding around that experience with somebody else. Just like, man, isn't it interesting how hard it is to come in to be degrading some woman in this way or this feminine person in this way when it's kind of easy for me to do it the other way around, or let's talk about that. And I might need some explicit verbal consent around it. And I love it. I love hearing people say, especially around humiliation and around things that are intense power play like that. I want to hear them say that they want it, and I'll add that into a lot of my humiliation, right? I'll be like, oh, whatever, you like this, I know you do. You're gonna say it for me. No, I'm stopping. You're gonna fucking say it before I keep going. I'm gonna pause and make them say words that come out of their mouth in order for me to, and then I feel better about it. Even though I kind of made them say it, I know that I can, most of the time, I hope, I can tell when they're authentically expressing, yes, I want that, and yes, you're right, and sometimes I'll make them yell about it, or say something else if I'm feeling like it's not, their expression isn't big enough of want and desire. So using the humiliation to get the consent is one way. Having some people to post-process that with around whatever feelings that come up before or after, who may or may not be part of the scene, who are just buddies of yours who understand that, feminism and BDSM can sometimes be incongruous. I would totally do that. I mean, I had to have, in my kind of personal topping history, I was really tentative to hit women, to hit a girl in the face, to hit a femme in the face that I was dating. I was really hesitant about that kind of thing, and I had people kind of begging for it, and and then like rolling their eyes when I couldn't do it, because I was having too much paranoia or like too many second thoughts in my own head. And then later, I fast forward a few years, and I remember having what I sometimes call my feminist fist moment, where I was beating the shit out of somebody in a dungeon with my fists, like using my actual fists on their body. And a femme, a lover of mine, and I like pulled my hand back, and I had this huge grin on my face, and I was just like, so excited and happy, and I was ready to like go in for another something. And then I had this like third little snapshot from outside of myself of what I was doing with my fist all up and whatever, and I was like, holy shit, and I just got horrified with, and I had to like, I dropped my thing, I just got all flustered, I was like, oh my god, what am I doing with this feminist fist? But I was so into it and so happy about it, and then I was like, fuck. And that was even after I'd been, you know, kind of over it, quote unquote, for a while. That it still came up for me, and it still was like, oh no. And I think what actually happened, I didn't call the scene at that point, but like the person I was with was like, why are you stopping? Do it again. And then I was like, okay. So I could kind of ease myself back in, hearing some reassurance from them that like actually that is what they want. That is what and so I could trust in their agency when they can express that. You know, because their agency is like, I get to say what happens to my body. So if they start going, hey, do it more. Where'd you go? I like that. Can I please have some more? Then I'm like, oh right, you get to say this is for you. I'm in service to the thing that you want. To some degree, and it serves me in addition, right? Like it's mutual.
Well, I think you brought up a really good point. There's this common misconception that bottoms are really needy and they're the ones that like need the attention, and that can really be true, but I think it's often overlooked that tops need reassurance too. They need to know that they're doing right, and in the same way that you wouldn't point somebody to, you know, out of the wrong way for the clit, or you want to show them where that is, you want to do the same as a bottom in BDSM. And so I think that the way that I've worked through it is in the same way. When I'm a top, I just consistently check in, almost a little too much, because I rarely play with the same people twice. Mm-hmm. Kind of like that. And so I check in with them consistently to double check and triple check that yes, right, they do really. They're at when I'm hitting them at what I think is for me would be a 10, and for them is still a 1. Just kind of check in there, and that makes me feel a little better. Yeah, they're moaning and excited and really upset that I stopped, and that helps me push through that. Okay, it's not pain I'm giving them, it's pleasure, and seeing it as pleasure, even when it's painful, has really helped me mentally move through that. Another thing that came up when you were talking is I remembered I listened to your chat with on Why Are People Into That? And you guys were talking about how this idea of the bottom being protected from being hurt is almost like having someone take agency of their body, in that you are saying, hey, I know better than you do how much pain you can take. I know better than you do that you don't really want this. This is degrading. You don't really want to be degraded. It's just society telling you want to be degraded. And I really liked that aspect, that when you protect someone, that is a form of taking over agency of their body and of their desires.
Right, and it's a different thing if they're saying something like, hey, no, I need protection from this, and then you jump in and are like, yeah, I'm going to help you be protected. That's not the same as being like, I'm going to protect you even though you're not saying that you want any sort of protection whatsoever. Like that's...
Well, I think Tina Horn, who does Why Are People Into That, which is a great podcast for anybody who hasn't heard it, was talking more about people who were anti-women being degraded, and saying that any kind of degradation in BDSM is derogatory and therefore anti-feminist. And the idea is that is yet another way of taking agency away from women. So I try to remember that when I'm having issues with feminism and BDSM.
Yeah, that's great. Well said.
Yeah. I have a question that came in. So it's kind of a long one, but I like the explanation that came with it. When you're into specific kinds of consensual non-consent, excuse me, how do you feel okay about porn available out there? I mean, I think we all know the answer is to subscribe to sites and or DVDs, from reputable sources that practice transparency and consent. But free, quote, amateur porn is often the only accessible porn for lots of folks. And once upon a time, I was a teenager, unaware of the politics and ethics of porn, just surfing your porn naively. How do I process feelings of guilt or shame about watching BDSM porn? It's a long question with very complex, long question with a lot of layers.
Yeah, it's super thoughtful, and that is the kind of the thing that comes across to me first in the question is just like, well, clearly you're spending time thinking about this, and that you know, shifted and worked on your relationship to the porn industry, and you understand that there are some reputable, transparent, you know, studios that work on things like consent and agency and empowerment in a very authentic way, where the models, you know, talk about their experiences of empowerment working for those particular places. And yes, absolutely, the free porn that's available is often not that at all. And a lot of the free porn, too, on some of these, like, massive video sites now, right, are, like, very amateur, or people uploading shit that they did from their iPhone or whatever. And hopefully, with consent and for fun, like to get off, to realize, to every time they check in the video again and they realize they got 20 more views, they're like, oh my god, 20 people watched me get off. That's so sexy, right? That they get off on the exhibitionism of it. I mean, how do we get over that? Like, I don't know. I've consumed a lot of bad porn, bad books, bad food in my life that like doesn't necessarily agree with my politics all the time, and I don't know if I have to like do some sort of repenting for it exactly. I think it's just I think it's right, right. 6 tail cocks and 17-hour vibrators. Like, I mean, I think educating, I think having conversations, I think trying to take the shame out of sex is the most important piece around engaging in a sex-positive community, and that sometimes like our personal preferences or what gets us off or what's available to us is kind of problematic, and we don't have to be completely unproblematic 100% of the time.
I think that one of the things that brought up for me was that you mentioned food in there, and I think a lot of the idea of like, I put bad, quote, bad food, and there's this idea of bad food and good food and bad porn and good porn. And I think that consuming something, yes, I'm going to go out there and try to get local, organic, like humanely raised products, but if I eat McDonald's, I don't really need to beat myself up for it for the next 16 years. In the same way as if I go to a free porn site, I don't necessarily need to beat myself up for it, but at the same time, I want to try to ingest the kind of things that will make me a happier, healthier person mentally. So I try to tell people to choose their porn like they choose their food, and that you want to try to go from sources that you know are reputable sources and treat their workers with fair pay and fair quality and fair working situations. And so some of those sites people are looking for, Pink and White Productions has a lot of video on demand that you pay for. It's not free, but it's still, they're all really great, reputable stuff, heterosexual and queer. And Wood Rocket all of their stuff is free, and it's all, they pay their places. They're a whole new different type of idea where they are using ads on the site to pay for the porn, and then the porn is free. So there's a lot of sites out there where you can get free porn, but still not have to pay for porn, but still be able to do quality work. So. And
I don't know, maybe you can make up an equation for yourself, like of every, 10 free porns I watch, I'm going to donate $10 to a queer porn place so that they can keep making really awesome porn. And maybe if even if you're not going to, subscribe to the queer porn places or you're gonna share it, you're gonna promote it, you're gonna engage with it in a different way. Will you read the end of the question again? I wonder if there's something that I missed about it. Like,
how do I process feelings of guilt or shame about watching BDSM porn?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so for one, there's
also, sorry, she added a little. Also, institutionalized guilt for our desires, but that might be a bit much to tackle.
Oh, yeah. Institutionalized guilt for our desire. That's like, we could make that be another hangout. That's a whole other thing.
I was
Well,
at this,
and it's related.
yeah, I was at a conference where there was a panel of people who were in the feminist porn book, and I got up and asked them what kind of porn they like to watch. Do they watch feminist porn? And there was almost like the cone of silence put around the room, and we all had to promise that we weren't going to share this. And they shared the kind of porn that they watched, this feminist porn panel. And so many of them were ashamed of the kind of stuff that got them off, and that it wasn't feminist porn all the time. Even though they made it, even though they promoted it, even though they were advocates for feminist porn, they themselves weren't necessarily always watching that. That's not what got them off. And so having this conversation about like what really gets us off versus what we feel like we should be getting off on. Like what I really want right now is McDonald's hamburger, but what I really am eating is kale. You know, there's like sometimes we need to have permission to watch the bad shit and just get rid of that institutionalized guilt that we have. At the same time, we don't really want to promote the bad shit. So I'm with you. I'm with the person who asked the question.
Yeah, I'm with you too. And as far as BDSM goes, often I don't find the kind of BDSM that I want to watch. You know, the depth of degradation or humiliation or control or power or whatever in as many feminist and queer porn studios that I do. And like, actually, I watch a lot of old porn for that, to be honest. Maybe there's a regulation that happened at some point, and like the new stuff doesn't do that as much. But so when you're talking about BDSM,
a lot of the new stuff is really, a lot of porn is very like, there's the playbook. You have this shot, this shot, this shot, this shot, then we're done, and it feels very not as organic as the older stuff. And I feel like a lot of the more BDSM humiliation older stuff had that organicness to it, which is one of the things it didn't feel like people were reading from a script as much, and that's one of the reasons I'm drawn to it.
That's a good point. Totally. Well, I think it's a really interesting idea, and I love that you brought up this cone of silence moment at the feminist porn panel of like people being like, yeah, that's not actually what I watch or get off to or do what. And on the one hand, it's like their desires are totally personal, and on the other hand, you know, whatever I think it's important to explore our own intersexual landscapes in whatever way that they exist. And, you know, you can excavate and kind of figure out where that particular thing comes from or not. You don't have to. You don't have to know what it is, why it is that something turns you on to know that it does. And I think knowing that it does is the more important thing. And I don't know. I don't feel like I need tons and tons of politic in my personal turn-ons. And on the other hand, I'm obsessed with how personal politic affects my turn-ons and like how those things clash so much sometimes and how it doesn't seem like they should go together, but they do, and how it's such a challenge of like, why do I like this? It's so wrong. But then that's a piece of kind of why I like it. It's like the other side of the obsessing over that it's wrong is the then like jerking off to it.
So
I don't know.
Let's talk a little bit about that. There's power play in BDSM, and one of the things I think is so actually feministic about BDSM is reclaiming that power. You know, as a femme, I wore my little like 1950s housewife outfit for this conversation for a reason, although I'm not wearing any pants. I love my job. I don't have to wear pants. But
I appreciate all the things about that sentence.
The pants are polka dot to match the shirt, though, so that did happen. Amazing. And there's a picture on Instagram of it if anybody wants to see. But so I find that there's actually a lot of power in claiming those what can actually be a lot of feministic ideas and trying to, you know, equal out that playing field. Not necessarily in a way of when you go to a dominatrix and you're a powerful man and you pay to be humiliated, you're still kind of in the power structure there. But I think that there's a privilege as a queer person who plays with other queer people in queer spaces. It's almost like those gender, everything gets fucked with. And there's something really feministic about that, because I go into that space and I don't have to be femmy and girly and a bottom. I can be femmy and girly and top. I can be whatever I want. And when I take that space, I know that I took it because I actually want it. that's the space I have because I could take any space, versus outside in the world, I feel like I have to fem it up in certain ways to be treated in certain ways. So what do you think is feministic about BDSM? We've talked a little bit about why people could find it problematic. Let's talk about how it actually isn't problematic and what positive effects BDSM can have on feminism.
I mean, I think what you just said about having all the options and having all of the any of the possibilities is the most important thing, right? About I can come in and have this one particular femme bottom role, or I can come in and have a totally other role that is amazing and different. And I get to check in with myself and my body and my interests, and then act from there instead of acting from any other outside source.
I'm getting a little feedback on my end, so that's why I'm putting on my headphones.
Want me to put it on also, or are you good?
My computer was getting hot, so the fan turned on, and now that was the feedback. So that's why I have the headphones in now. There.
Okay, that totally fixed it. From my end, anyway. Well, and the other thing I want to say about the dominatrix and the power man who comes in to be humiliated is that it isn't. I don't see putting down men as the same thing as lifting up women. That sometimes people joke about. Where was I recently? I was at a conference or something, and the example was yeah, fuck those men, they should be licking our boots or whatever, and I was kind of like, that's not. I mean, yeah, sure, absolutely they can do that. There's nothing wrong with that, but that to me does not equal female empowerment. So just because you flip the script doesn't mean that somebody has more power. I'm interested in fucking with power to the degree that we all have it and we can all step into it and we can all, take it and play with it and feel powerful and empowered in whatever ways that we like to do that. And in some ways, power play, through dominance and submission and even through heavy sensation play, I think that can be a form of playing with power. I don't see it as one person has the power and the other person doesn't. I see it as one person maybe has the authority and the other person is being done to or being told what to do. And because I think everybody in the equation gets power, feels power. I know bottoms who are their most strongest, awesome selves in deep bottoming submissive spaces, and that's really powerful. It's really empowering and interesting and power based. I don't think it's about taking away their power, So
my friend always says, from the mouth of the bottom comes the scene. So they set the tone. They are the ultimate person in power. They're the one who can stop it at any time. They have the ultimate power.
Yeah, my boy talks about it as a car metaphor, where the top is the one who's got the steering wheel, who's going, I'm going to go left, I'm going to go right, I'm going to go down this road, and the bottom is the one with the pedals of faster, faster, slow down, or, keep going, or we're going to stop, or we're going to check in, or first gear, second gear, or whatever.
It's funny you say that because my partner and I talk, they're my captain, and I'm the first mate, so, I'm steering the vessel, but they ultimately decide the path we're taking. So that's a similar analogy. Totally
similar, and all the same ideas of the bottom, of course, with the veto power, or with the can control not necessarily what happens, although often the bottom does control what happens, but from out of the mouth of the bottom comes the scene kind of idea, and often offers some sort of palette. Here's the palette I want to play on. These are my limits, these are my parameters, these are the things I really, really love, this is what I'd be willing to do if you really want me to, here you go. And then you get to kind of do the things to the bottom in whatever way that pleases the top, right?
Yeah.
But it kind of depends on how you're playing with that. If I'm gonna come in, and usually in the beginning of relationships for me, or of lovers, or play even just first datey hookups, I'll be more in a service top kind of mode, where I will get a bunch of information from them about what they want and what they're looking for, and I will service their needs in a particular way, which is different than coming in and being you know what, I really need this and this and this, and I know that none of those are on your hard limit list, so we're going to do them now.
And you just talked a little bit about hard limit lists, and that's for people who may be new to this. There are these things called yes, no, and maybe lists, and you kind of make a list with a person on yes, all the things you want to do, no, these are things you don't want to do, maybe's kind of in between. And actually, there's a really great one on Frisky Feminist Press at friskyfeminist.com in the guide Love Hurts, a consent-based guide to kink that Kurashino Cherry, Catherine Victoria did, that has a yes, hell yes, a yes if you are into it, a maybe, a no, and a hell no list. And I actually kind of like having the 5. And one of the things that I actually have found is really empowering is when I'm starting to feel a little nervous about topping somebody, I know that this is in their hell yes list. And so I'm doing something that I know pleases them, and that helps me even when I'm having problems like hitting somebody, being punched in the face is on their hell yes, please do it list, then I'm going to feel a little bit better about doing it.
Totally. That's a great point.
Yeah. We had a couple comments, one from Del Tashlin, who I love. My new scene name is Bonus Humiliator, which apparently is something that we said at some point in this. And yeah, we had a couple other just like shout out and love. And yeah. So we are at the end of our time. Do you have any last bits that you'd like to add that we haven't gotten to yet?
Oh gosh, I'm just looking at my notes right here. I think that for folks who are new to playing with power and who have a strong, sexual, feminist politic behind them, to go slow and to focus on what's really, really awesome and working is always great. Like the worst case scenario, maybe you didn't push all your edges and find brand new things that were scary to be not scary, but what you did do was have a really good time, and that helps build your confidence, especially in the beginning of like, uh-oh, but this is scary. Well, what's not scary? Focus on that part and do that for a while. And then once something else becomes a little less scary, or like, well, okay, so I've really got this part down, and then this little part I could add that in, and maybe it'll be a little less scary. To build up your confidence and try a variety of new things. And talk to people. That's my other piece of advice, I think. I mean, you can always talk to some many celebrities on the internet, I'm sure, but also just your friends and your partner, and tell them what you like, tell them what you don't like, tell them you watched this hangout today, and have all these ideas that these two wacky queers were talking about. Like, you don't, I love pointing to third-party things that are like, this other person is this big kinkster and says this and this. What do you think about that?
Hey, look at this crazy.
So you don't have to.
Would you want to do that?
It doesn't have to be quite as vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly.
Would I what? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I also tell people to start with sensation play. So you can always start with like ice cubes or cold stuff and then move your way up to, flogging eventually. But sensation play is something anybody can do, but people don't realize that that's, the beginning of kink is starting with some ice cubes or some warm candles, things like that.
Right. Yeah. Right. Just a little extra hand on the wrist, or a little extra hand over your eyes so you can't see what I'm about to do, or close your eyes even, denying senses. Totally. There's lots of ways to that. And that if things get harder to reconcile on your own, to reach out. I do coaching individually, but by Skype and in person, and you probably talk to people all the time. I don't know what your coaching kind of situation is.
I do coaching, and I have a column where I answer people's questions, so you can always write and ask me.
Right, because sometimes once you get beyond the 101, your advanced level questions become more advanced level answers, and you need more specifics, and it's not something necessarily a 101 will cover. So, yeah, reach out, talk to people. That's my advice.
So if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Sugarbush.net is my big hub, so that's where basically everything happens. Got a contact form on there. I've got information about coaching. I've got a variety of other places, but that's the hub.
That's the hub. Okay, and we'll put the variety of other places down there for people who are watching this on YouTube later after it's live. And yeah, thank you for coming today. Any last things before we head out?
Well, thanks so much for having me. This is super fun. I don't know if we've actually had a chat before, although I've been following your work for years, so that's
I know,
cool.
we were actually supposed to be roommates at Yale to
Great.
speak, and I got the flu and couldn't come, so this is our first time chatting face to
I
face.
was so looking forward to that.
I know, I was looking forward to it too.
And that was the time of the snowstorm. We were all
there
stuck
was a
in a
massive snowstorm, and everybody was stuck in the hotel rooms.
Yeah.
Getting through, yeah.
Which I shall not reveal because, of course, it was all very private. Special time.
Of course. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you everybody who was watching. We got a great set of viewers and a lot of people writing in. Once again, I'm Lauren Marie Fleming and Queerie Bradshaw, and this was part of a whole series called the Sex Ed Hangout, and you can find the whole series on youtube.com/Queerie Bradshaw, or you can go to queriebradshaw.com/sexedhangout to find the rest of them. And thank you again, Sinclair, for joining us, and we will talk with you all later. Bye.
Bye.